We are told that cities are the problem. We are told that cities are crowded, dirty, and dangerous. We're told that cities promote greed and consumption. We are told that cities are causing the destruction of nature. Entire landscapes transform to fulfill the needs of the city. Effects so dramatic indeed that they're changing the climate as if we were a force of geology or we were gods. We are told, and it may feel like, that we live in a time where everything has gone wrong, where everything, especially for the environment, is a kind of hell, full of chaos, with little hope of winning the war against greed, selfishness, and the destruction of the planet. And I have a confession to make. This is a story that I've also told. I used to tell stories like this with my full heart. But I've gone on a journey to a different way of understanding the meaning of cities in our time, and that's what I want to tell you about today. It begins by making the observation that the move towards cities is the greatest migration in all of human history. For tens of thousands of years, people lived in small communities widely distributed across the landscape. But over the last 200 years, there's been this massive move toward towns. It used to be that less than 10% of all people lived in cities, but now, by the latest count, 57% of people live in cities, even though the population is 8 times greater than it was just 200 years ago. And this is happening across all countries, across all continents, across all income groups. So why is that? Why do people move to town? It begs the question. People move to town for economic opportunity. They move for better jobs, for better employment, for better education, for better health care, for more freedom, for fun, if not for themselves, then for their kids. It's amazing that people for generations have been choosing to leave the countryside and move to cities, even when it means they need to live in extremes of urban poverty. In China, when the government let people move from the rural places where they lived to wherever they wanted to live in cities, more than 1 billion people moved into the massive cities of the Central Kingdom. The economic benefits of urbanization are now well understood. The economy grows because of the concentration of firms, specialization, the economies of scale, access to capital and communications, better infrastructure at lower per capita costs, and because of learning and innovation as people move between firms. And this is having dramatic effects on human societies on Earth into the long-term future. Many demographers believe that the world population will stabilize through the demographic transition driven by urbanization. At the same time, extreme poverty is going extinct for the first time in all of human history. Urbanization is expected by the end of the century to lead to 80 to 90% of people, 4 in 5 people living on Earth, to live in cities. Not everyone will live in cities, not everyone wants to live in cities, but most people are choosing to. And that's causing these massive effects on the environment that we're living through. But we tend to see cities as a whole, as an aggregate, and then what we really need to think about is cities as places where individual people live. On a per capita basis, if you take my own town, the average New Yorker consumes 74% less water than the average American, 35% less electricity, generates 45% less garbage. This is because of the way the urban form leads to different lifestyle choices on behalf of people living in cities, and because cities are smaller entities, they can organize themselves to lower their environmental impact. It's also true that cities densify and concentrate people. This map shows the 38 United States that have fewer people than the 5 boroughs of New York City. So nature needs cities, but it turns out that cities also need nature. And that leads us to 3 actions to nature your city. To nature your city, you need to see the nature, you need to value nature, and you need to make nature yours. In my own work, I study the historical ecology of the city, And I think it's tremendously helpful to see the nature of the city, the places where our cities are. It turns out that cities are in places of high biological diversity in their regions all around the world. And that's because species like the same thing that people do: fertile soils, fresh water, ecosystem variation, access to the wider world, as you can see in this image of Mannahatta. When we see the city through its historical ecology, when we see the nature in the city, we see how our rush toward urbanization has transformed the landscape. We've been so keen to squeeze every last place for people that we've squeezed the nature out of our cities. But not so fast. As the climate changes, what we're finding is that the places where extreme rain events are causing flooding are the same places where wetlands and streams once were across our cities. So we need to make more room for nature, and to do that, we need to make the economy see the ecology. We tend to think of the economy as a box with producers that make products that consumers consume, who then pay money back to the producers, and that the government takes a small portion of that for its taxes. But we need to see that the economy is not isolated, but it's actually part of nature, and that nature provides natural resources that make the economy work, and it provides waste that come out of the economy. And so the first action we can take, the very simple action, is just to move the taxes. Move taxes from within the economy to the border between the ecology and the economy, both on the natural resource side and on the waste side. We can do this for the most valuable commodity in cities, which is the land. If we see land, if we see the places where our buildings are, where our businesses are, our ecosystems that have been displaced by development, then we can start to have a basis for taxation. We've taken a public good, which is ecosystem services, and we've turned it into a private good, which is our economy. And so that creates the basis for valuing different ecosystems and valuing them across the trajectory of development in a way that is more equitable, fair, and can lead to longer and more sustained cities. But how dense do these cities need to be? Not as dense as Manhattan. They can be as dense as Cambridge, Massachusetts. In my calculations, 10,000 people per square mile, about 3,800 people per square kilometer, with 30 to 50% of the space reserved for nature. And how do we get that? Where do we get that? Through innovating in the transportation space. More walking, more bicycling, mass electrified transport like this streetcar in New Orleans that'll allow us not only to make our cities more sustainable, but also to tap into the amazing renewable resources of the country. Finally, we need to make nature ours through active restoration, literally putting plants in the ground. We found that cities all around the world are learning that nature-based solutions are adaptable, equitable, beautiful, resilient ways to deal with climate change, and that plants can go in the most unlikely of places, including on old rail lines like the High Line in New York City. The High Line not only created new habitats and a new green amenity, but completely rewrote values in Hell's Kitchen. But most importantly, by putting plants in the ground together, we connect to the world we live in and to each other. We create meaning and friendship and rapport that allows us to move together from our cities into the future. So what are the conditions for a lasting society and an abundant natural world? They're cities. Cities that need nature because nature needs cities. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.